Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. If y'all could start taking your seats. Our band is going to play their best song right now. Feel free to dance or by your table. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the band. That was great music. If everyone could take their seats. Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to an evening for healers. I've waited 2 long years to say that, and that feels very good to say it. Hello, I'm Kevin Flood, President and CEO of the LSU Health Sciences Foundation. Tonight will be special in more ways than one. First, we are celebrating 10 years of heroes, healing, and hope. You know, it amazes me when I reflect on what this event has grown to become and what it now means to our institution and to our community. I've got to admit to you, if you were here 10 years ago, we had no idea what we were doing. And we still do to this day, but it's been a good 10 years. Over the past 10 years, we've shared 19 stories of triumph over adversity. We've honored 677 of our community's finest heroes and healers. And we've raised over $2.5 million for LSU Health Shreveport. We are keenly aware of the COVID-19 surge our state and nation is experiencing right now. And we stand firmly behind those men and women on the front line who are there to take care of us in our hour of most need. Because they deserve to hear from us that they are appreciated, valued, and loved. We hold this event tonight for them. I also want to recognize those in our audience tonight who have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic. We know there are many physicians, nurses, first responders, healthcare professionals tonight who have put their health and safety on the line every day for the greater good. Tonight is also for you. Yes. Honestly, it's the number one reason why we felt like we had to hold this tonight. We couldn't postpone it again because it was just too important. In fact, if y'all could do me a favor, if anyone in the audience tonight, whether they're being honored tonight as a healer or they were honored some point in the last 10 years, would you please stand so that we could acknowledge everyone? I also believe this is an opportunity for us to show the community how to safely hold an event like this, even during these unprecedented times. So thank you to you, our audience, for leading by example and being fully vaccinated. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tom Harrison, Executive Pastor of Broadmoor Baptist Church, to provide tonight's invocation. Dr. Harrison is a first responder himself, serving as chaplain with both the Civil Air Patrol Air Force Auxiliary and the Louisiana Baptist Disaster Relief. Dr. Harrison.
Isaiah chapter 41:13 says this, "For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you." Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we gather tonight to celebrate the wonderful gifts of heroes, healing, and hope that is provided through the hands, minds, and abilities of the dedicated first responders. We're grateful for the men and women in uniform that come out every day to care for us and support us. We know that these are stressful times in our community and world. Thank you for the dedicated employees and workers of LSU Health Shreveport. We're so blessed by those in the medical field, scientists, EMTs, firefighters, law enforcement personnel, researchers, and administration. We furthermore ask that you grant patience and understanding for the families of these first responders and their loved ones, and protect their marriages and family relationships. Bless the sacrifices that their families make so their loved ones can serve. We ask you to give all these LSU Health responders emotional protection, and that you would guard their hearts as they face criticism or anger from those they serve. Father, please keep our first responders emotionally strong, but spiritually tender when they are confronted by the evil and brokenness around them. Give them your peace as they deal with the pain and suffering of others, and at all times experience injustice. Thank you for the generous sponsors here tonight and those who gifts so others can receive. Thank you for the provision of this event and meal. Use this nourishment to strengthen us for the journeys ahead. We pray all of this in the great physician's name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. That was beautiful. Everyone, go ahead and start please enjoying your dinner if you haven't already started doing that. The service staff has asked that you just please remain seated until you have your entree served so they can properly serve us. I do want to mention that for the first time in this event's history, we are live streaming tonight's festivities. So everyone in internet land, hello. Tonight is about honoring and celebrating those who make a life-changing difference in our community. It's also about raising awareness of just how important LSU Health Shreveport is to our community. I think you all would agree with me that I shudder to think where we would be today without LSU Health Shreveport. We can also celebrate a record-breaking evening for healers. Because of you, we've raised the most money ever from the most sponsors ever. Thank you. Your financial support helps LSU Health Shreveport recruit and retain top faculty, provide new research and educational opportunities for our students, residents, and faculty, and ensures that our community has access to highly specialized care. I have to thank our fantastic events team, both at the foundation, at LSU Health Shreveport, at Oshner LSU Health Shreveport. There's so many people that I can't single out everyone, but thank you for what you did. I do have to single out Amanda Fallon, who's our donor relations and events manager, who headed all this up. Our MC tonight for tonight's program was scheduled to be Lieutenant Barry Spinney from Troop G of the Louisiana State Police. Sadly, Lieutenant Spinney's father passed away from COVID on Wednesday night. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Lieutenant Spinney and his family during this difficult time. But we are blessed to have a wonderful person waiting in the wings to gracefully lead our program tonight, our very own event chair, Waynette Ballingy. Waynette is the preeminent volunteer in our community. She has chaired events for Robinson's Film Center, American Heart Association, our own Feisweiler Cancer Center, and Shreveport Regional Arts Council, just to name a few. She serves on the boards of the Shreveport Airport Authority, Red River STEM, Gingerbread House, and Robinson Film Center. In 2012, she was honored as the Association of Fundraising Professionals Volunteer Fundraiser of the Year and was a Virginia K. Sheehy Most Influential Women finalist in 2017. Because this event was canceled last year, Waynette holds the distinction of serving as the longest-serving Evening for Healers event chair ever. So for that reward, she gets to be our MC. Waynette, it's been an honor and privilege to work with you these past 2 years. Thank you for all that you do for our community. Ladies and gentlemen, Waynette Ballingy.
Gosh, Kevin, you said half the things that I was going to say. Kevin, it has been my honor and privilege to work with you and all of your amazing team at the Health Sciences Foundation, and to work with my lifelong friend, Lisa Babin, as we played a small part in putting together this hope-filled, amazing evening. The road to tonight has been a long and winding road. For Kevin, Amanda, Jesse, Lisa, and myself, we have experienced a million emotions as we put this event together. When we started 2 years ago, we felt excitement, we had great expectations, we felt joy, we felt all the things you feel when you're excited. Then as the months rolled by, we started to feel some different things: concern, fear, anxiety, uncertainty. But we hung in there, and eventually we cycled back around to amazing expectations, some great successes, a few bumps along the way, and I can tell you that we did face our share of challenges. But most thankfully, we stand here tonight making this event and honoring all of these amazing honorees a reality. I'm pretty proud of that. Now, if you were listening to Kevin just a second ago, I hope that you heard him say, I was not the number one choice to be your MC for this evening. What he did not tell you is that I was not the second choice either. I wasn't the third choice. So I proudly stand here tonight as the fourth runner-up. And if you know me, you know that I really do not like to finish fourth at anything. But I am going to make an exception this evening, and I have never been more proud to have gone from fourth place to first place, because that means that I get to experience this evening with you as your MC, and I am so proud to be here. Two years ago, when Kevin approached me about serving as the chairperson for Evening for Healers, because he had received an anonymous tip from my friend Lisa Babin that I love a project. So wherever Lisa is, thank you, my friend. You got me into more trouble than I could get out of. I said yes without a moment of hesitation, because for me personally, LSU Health Shreveport shines as a beacon on a hill, providing a sense of hope, comfort, stability, and perhaps most importantly, a source of enormous civic pride. We are pretty lucky to have an organization like LSU Health Shreveport right here in our own backyard. Tonight, you may be sitting there saying, okay, why does this evening matter? Why is it really important? Although there are 1,000 reasons that tonight matters, I'd like to remind you of two very important ones. First, it is vitally important that we intentionally pause to honor and appreciate the skills, compassion, and expertise of our first responders and healthcare workers. Secondly, tonight is a significant evening because it gives us as a community the opportunity to shine a spotlight on the amazing body of work that happens each and every single day, not just occasionally, at LSU Health Shreveport. Tonight, we will hear 3 incredibly inspiring stories that showcase our wonderful healers and heroes. I guarantee you that it will be impossible to leave this building in a few hours without having been touched, inspired, and feeling eternally grateful. We'll hear the story of Jared Jones, a father-to-be who survived or experienced a catastrophic car accident on I-20. We'll also hear the story of young Brayley Davis, who survived an unthinkable accident that happened in her very own backyard. And lastly, we will hear the story of how local physician Dr. Bill White overcame a lengthy and brutal battle with COVID-19. I'm so happy to tell you he won the battle. On any given day, any of us sitting in this room this evening could find ourselves in a similar situation to the 3 people who you are going to learn more about this evening. We can rest assured that because of the existence of LSU Health Shreveport, we have the best of the best working in this community, standing ready to take care of any of us at a moment's notice when we are in our hour of greatest need. Now, I hope that you will enjoy the delicious meal that we have planned for you this evening, and we will be back to start our program in about 20 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, your 20 minutes is up. You have to finish eating. No, I'm kidding. We hope that you are enjoying your wonderful meal prepared by the staff here at the Convention Center. If you have finished eating, we would like to ask you to please mask up. It's very important that we follow the COVID protocols that have been established that allow us to have this evening. So please be respectful of the mask mandate. As previously mentioned, An Evening for Healers is now in its 10th year, which is an amazing accomplishment of its own. To commemorate this special anniversary, we'd like to share a special flashback video featuring some of our past patients and their healers.
The fact that they do what they do so well and got me out of that car in the way they did, the way the trauma center performs its duties. I know they do it every day for so many other people. This is their jobs, but they also did it for me, and they saved my life. They're not just friends, they're lifesavers.
You know, it started with the firefighters. I mean, if it wasn't for them, you know, I wouldn't be here today. Then it goes to the helicopter pilot. If he, you know, didn't get me where I needed to be and got me strapped down and everything that I needed to get to LSU, and then once I got to LSU, I don't know how many people it was. It felt like 100 people there working on me. I mean, they went to work and worked on me hard and got me where I'm at today. I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them, and I'm so thankful.
I appreciate what they did for me, and I thank them for what they did, and I thank them for saving my life.
I've been writing this letter in my mind for months, but the words never seem to be able to fully express how thankful I am for all of you. But please know that I search for them daily, as I enjoy every precious moment with my family. I will always be thankful for everyone who helped me when I came to LSU. You are my personal heroes, and I look forward to the day when I can tell my girls about the amazing group of people who saved my life.
The next thing I remember is laying on the ground, and I kind of did a systems check at that point, and then I noticed I couldn't breathe at all. I waited for a second, thinking that maybe I just got the wind knocked out of me, and the air would come back shortly. I just felt like God kind of wrapped his arms around me and said, you know, I got more for you to experience in this life, and I felt kind of air trickle back into my lungs. I'm indebted to you guys for what y'all did for me. You gave me your best, and I'm forever thankful for the things you did for me and my family.
thank you so much for the time you spent in a classroom years ago learning all this, because you got to put it into practice with me. But most of all, thank you for giving me back my life, for bringing me to this point that I'm healthy and completely back to my old self.
LSU is all I know. Don't take me nowhere else. I want to go to LSU. If anything happens, if LSU can't fix it, nobody can.
All the emergency room staff, all the PICU staff, all the MICU staff. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. They're all very sweet and they all mean a lot to me.
Thank you for loving what you do. Thank you for being there for my wife and my family. Without you, we wouldn't have my wife today. And I will do anything for any of them. All they have to do is ask. I'd do anything for them.
What a wonderful legacy of healing and hope. I'm happy to share with you that some of our former patients are in the audience tonight. Would these individuals please stand and be recognized? Tim Glisson, Trent Wyrick, Robert Jones, and Ray Snow. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I would now like to introduce LSU Health Shreveport's interim chancellor, Dr. David Lewis. Dr. Lewis is himself a proud graduate of LSU Health Shreveport and has been an OB/GYN for more than 27 years. He has served as professor and chair of the OB/GYN department since 2016 and was appointed dean of the medical school in 2018. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Lewis.
Well, thank you. Good evening. I'm so glad that we're here celebrating this again tonight. 10 years. I just, you know, it's an amazing feat, and seeing those stories again just brings back memories. I've told Mr. Flood before, if he really wants to raise some money, he just needs to sell Kleenex at this event, and we can definitely do a lot better. It also is good just to be here, honestly. You know, we have a vaccinated group of people. We can do this safely, and so it is good to be back with you, and I thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. It's not only this pandemic that's affecting us, it's also what's going on in South Louisiana. And a lot of our fellow Louisianans are hurting right now then. I know that LSU Health particularly is catching a big brunt because they actually have 3 of the hospitals down in Terrebonne Parish that were hit so hard. Many of our sponsors and people that were coming tonight were unable to come, including one of our guest speakers, our new president of LSU, President Bill Tate. But I can assure you we'll get him back next year, and he sends his best. This is a night that we look forward to each and every year. LSU Health and our hospital partner, Ochsner LSU Health of Shreveport. I want to thank each and every person that makes this a very special night. There are some elected officials here that give of themselves just beyond anything that we can imagine, and particularly with what's going on in this state and this country over the last year, they deserve special recognition. And we appreciate them taking time to be here. And so I'd like to recognize each and every one of them that are here tonight. Senator Beryl Peacock, thank you, sir. Representative Larry Bagley, thank you, sir. Representative Cedric Glover, thank you, sir. Representative Jack McFarland, thank you, sir. Our wonderful mayor, Mayor Perkins, right here, thank you. Judge Brady O'Callahan, thank you. We have several commissioners here from the Caddo Parish Commission. We have Commissioner Lynn Cawthorn. Lynn, thank you for being here. And also Commissioner Roy Burrell. We also have someone from the City Council, Councilman James Green. Thank you. There are also a couple of individuals that deserve a tremendous amount of our respect and accolades. They're sitting down front down here. These individuals are volunteers that have been through a lot over the last year, and these are members of the LSU Board of Supervisors. And we're very happy to have our 2 representatives from Northwest Louisiana be here tonight, Mrs. Valencia Sharpie Jones, and Mr. Wayne Brown. Thank y'all so much for all you do for our university, our school, and also for the state of Louisiana. From the Chamber of Commerce, we have both of the presidents here. From the Shreveport Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Timothy Magner, and the president of the Bossier Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Johnson. Thank you for being here tonight. There also is another very special group of people that work tirelessly for our Health Science Center. These are people that are working behind the scenes, and you meet some of them here tonight. It's our LSU Health Foundation Board. And this particular group is led by Armand Roos. He's the chairman of the board this year, and we appreciate all him and that Lynn do. But I also want to recognize the entire board. With the entire board of the foundation, please stand. Thank you so much for what you do. As you've heard, this is the 10th anniversary of this event, and the chairs work incredibly hard. We've had one that's been it for 2 years, so I guess she gets to stand up twice. But if you've been a chair of the Night of Healers in the past, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you for all you've done. You know, sponsorship is very important to events like this, and we are very blessed to have a sponsor that not only is the presenting sponsor for this event, but also is our hospital partner. LSU Health has now been our presenting sponsor for the last 3 years. They also are our partners that work with us over at LSU Health in our hospital. Many of them from South Louisiana plan to come up here because of what is going on in South Louisiana. Many of them could not. But we have many of them here locally, Chuck Daigle and Steve Randall, Chris Mangin. There's so many that I'm going to miss somebody if I try to name everybody. But we'd like to thank you for what you do for us. We are blessed to have one of the individuals that we deal with all the time up here that made the trip up to Shreveport today, Dr. Leo Swanee. Dr. Swanee has been with us from the beginning. He is currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Academic Officer at Ochsner, but we put him to work in Shreveport, and we made him Associate Vice Chancellor of Academics at LSU Health a number of years ago. And I would like for you to welcome Dr. Swanee to the stage. He's going to say a few words to us. Dr. Swanee.
Thank you, Chancellor Lewis. I am very proud to represent LSU Health tonight, and it's such a special night. And we're thrilled to have this opportunity to sponsor an event dedicated to honoring the heroes in our communities through these incredible patient stories. I also want to thank and recognize everyone in the audience tonight, because if you're here, you're fully vaccinated. You've done your part to keep yourself healthy, your family, and your community safe. You also have demonstrated respect for the first responders, nurses, clinicians, and physicians that work every day to save the lives of COVID patients at their own risk. These are the very people we're gathered here today to honor, so we all thank you. I grew up in Louisiana, and I graduated from LSU School of Medicine in New Orleans, then completed my pulmonary critical care and lung transplant fellowship in an LSU Ochsner combined program. So I know the value of a good partnership. The COVID-19 pandemic of the past 1.5 years, the ice storm in Shreveport, and now the Hurricane Ida have highlighted how critical our first responders and healthcare providers are to the health and well-being of our communities and our patients. Being here tonight to recognize the heroic work of our first responders, healthcare professionals, and success of the Ochsner-LSU partnership is truly an honor. 3 years ago, I stood on this stage and I had the privilege of representing Ochsner for the 2018 Evening for Healers, knowing that Ochsner and LSU shared a vision to expand medical education, advance research, and enhance access to health care across all of North Louisiana. A few months later, Ochsner Health and LSU partnership came to fruition. The combined resources and strengths of these two partners, LSU Health Shreveport and Ochsner Health, together with the team at Ochsner LSU Health, has exceeded all expectations. In 2020, Ochsner launched the Healthy State Initiative to improve the health of Louisiana, manifested by improving our health rankings from our traditional poor rankings of 49 to 50 to 40th in the next 10 years. As part of our Healthy State Initiative, Ochsner has committed $100 million, which will focus on eliminating barriers to health care, bringing resources into underserved and rural communities, leveraging our partnerships in research to understand health disparities, utilize technology and innovation to improve health outcomes, and invest in Louisiana's next generation of healthcare providers. We know we can't do this alone. That's why the partnerships with LSU and LSU Health are so important. Together, we can give the citizens of Louisiana the health and wellness they deserve. With LSU Health Shreveport, we're working together on breakthrough research initiatives to continue improving care now and for future generations. Osher began the Xavier Graduate Scholarship Program, now in its third year, awarding full LSU Health Shreveport Medical School tuition to a worthy student who's dedicated to practicing in Louisiana, and to increase the diversity of our physicians who care for our diverse communities. I'd like to recognize these scholarship recipients because they're here tonight. Will you please stand to be recognized? Additionally, this year we launched the Osher Scholars Program to address physician shortages in primary care and psychiatry. With a $15 million committed over the next 5 years, this program covers tuition for 30 medical students who receive their education either at the Osher Clinical School or LSU Health Shreveport, right here in Shreveport. Our partnership has significantly increased access to health care across all of North Louisiana, because medical care isn't only for emergencies. Having health care available where you need it and when you need it is key to healthy communities. The partnership has made more than $200 million in capital investments over the last 3 years, including new facilities, equipment renovations, and new cutting-edge technology. Osher LSU also recognizes that providing health care is only possible through having the right, caring, compassionate health care providers. That's why we've hired over 250 physicians and 700 employees over the past 3 years. When myself and the rest of the Osher executives visited the hospital in Shreveport more than 3 years ago, we knew this partnership would work because of its people. The dedication, the compassion, and above all, the resiliency of this team here in Shreveport is exemplary. On behalf of Osher Health, to the heroes who are being honored tonight, to the researchers whose work will save future lives, to the physicians who care for people throughout the entire region and train the future generation of physicians, to the support staff who bravely faced the pandemic with us, to the first responders and the emergency department for being there at someone's most vulnerable time, to the nurses who have held the hands of too many patients this past year when their family couldn't be with them. Your compassion has truly been inspiring. And to everyone behind the scenes who makes this life-saving work possible. You're why we at Osher Health and Osher LSU remain committed to this great partnership. You're why we're confident that we will improve the health of the citizens of our great state. You're truly saving and changing lives every day. I'm proud to celebrate each and every one of you, and on behalf of Osher Health, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swanee, for those inspiring words. I'd like to now recognize some key sponsors that make this event so successful, quite honestly. And we're going to start off with the Chancellor sponsors. And we're going to start off with BRF and Dr. John George, one of our alumni. We appreciate what you've done, Dr. George, and your group. Lindsay and John Adkins can't be here tonight. They're good friends of Kathy's and mine, but they have supported this event and other events throughout the city over the years, and we appreciate Lindsay and John, and we know that they're watching virtually. We have two dean sponsors tonight, Mr. and Mrs. David Means. Thank you so much. and also the Willis-Knighton Health System who are watching this virtually. Thank you so much for your generous gift. We have a lifetime sponsor that is constantly giving to the Health Science Center, and it's the Moffitt family. And I saw Susan earlier. They are just incredibly generous, and we appreciate them. We have a number of underwriting sponsors that allow us to maximize the benefits of raising money for this event. I want to start off with the welcome reception that we had this evening, and that was sponsored by Christus Health Shreveport Bossier, Dr. Steen Trewick and his group. Another one of our alumni. We appreciate it, Steen. Thank you so much. The Healers honoree sponsor is Dr. and Mrs. Lacey Williams. Thank you. The valet sponsor, once again, Moffitt, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, Mazda of Shreveport Bossier. Thank you so much, Susan. We did have a VIP sponsor party, and Sid Potts Incorporated sponsored that. We appreciate it, Sid. Tonight's wine is courtesy of Cuban Liquor and Wine. The invitation sponsor was Paragon Press. The program sponsor was Campus Federal Credit Union. Thank you, guys. And our friends over at Lee Michaels have supplied us with the Healer medals that you'll see on each of the healers this evening. We want to thank them. There are some phenomenal arrangements at every table, and somebody that I work with on a daily basis, Dr. Peggy Murphy and her husband David, sponsored those. Thank you so much, Peggy and David. You know, these are the high-level sponsors, but I will be honest, each and every one of you, each and every dollar that you were able to give or sponsor a table is very important to the ultimate success of our Health Science Center, and I want to say thank you. And as Kevin Flood mentioned earlier, this is a record year for fundraising for this event. That's incredible. Now, there's a couple of other groups that I do want to go ahead and recognize. One of them are the dedicated faculty, employees, students, staff, residents that work at LSU Health. If you're a faculty member, employee, student, resident at LSU Health, could you please stand to be recognized? Thank you so much. Now, some of these same people are going to stand up for this next group because we also have a hospital, and there are many people from that hospital that are here tonight. And so if you're a doctor in that hospital, a resident in that hospital, a student in that hospital, a nurse, an administrator, anybody that works for Oshner LSU Health, Shreveport of North Louisiana, please stand, regardless of the campus. It is because of the hard work and dedication from the faculty and staff, as well as the community support, that I'm happy to say LSU Health Shreveport continues to be a shining beacon of hope in North Louisiana. Along with our hospital partner, LSU Health Shreveport continues to work relentlessly to lead the fight against COVID-19 pandemic through testing, research, and vaccination. I'm also proud to report that construction has actually begun on this beautiful new building, and we're about 18 months away from moving into it. Parking is a problem over there. This is the new Center for Medical Education, and this will transform who we are as an institution, quite honestly. Not only will we be able to increase the number of physicians that we train by 1/3 or another 50 physicians, and I want to point out to you that 70% of the people that we train at LSU Health Shreveport stay in the state of Louisiana, and they treat patients throughout the whole state. That's higher than any other medical school in the state. So not only will we be able to train more physicians, but it also will be the home for the Center of Excellence for Emerging Viral Threats. And I can't wait to the day that some of the doctors and researchers over at LSU Shreveport can solve this problem where I don't have to wear that stupid mask. I'm sick of it. I know a lot of y'all like the mask, okay? But seriously, we have some national leaders, and they are doing cutting-edge research, and this building will take us to the next level with that whole process. I'm also excited to announce that 92% of the funding has already been obtained. Yes, the state of Louisiana has kicked in their part, and we appreciate all the state senators and representatives that are here and for your help today, along with Dr. Pierre and others that have really helped with that whole process. But our partnership has also, and Osher Health himself has put in a significant amount of money, along with the donations of many of you out there. So I want to say thank you to everyone that has donated to this. This is critical to us. See, you heard that. It's critical. Even the train knew that. But we do want to push it over the finish line here. And so any further donations are greatly appreciated for this beautiful building that will be transformational. You know, tonight you're going to hear 3 incredible stories as you usually do. And I'm going to tell you before you get started, they're going to be tearjerkers. So they're going to be very, very moving. Honestly, these are people that wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for a lot of people. Yes, it's about the doctors and nurses, but it's also about the paramedics and the firemen and the people out there in the field that do the incredible work day in and day out. And many of these people don't get the recognition that they need to get. It also is because we have a great academic medical center, Osher LSU Health of Shreveport. We're the only level 1 trauma center in the region, as you all know. And we're also the only level 2 pediatric trauma center in the state of Louisiana. Osher LSU Health is committed to delivering the level of care required to produce extraordinary outcomes like you're going to see tonight. I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm going to ask Mr. Kevin Flood to come back up to the podium for some special presentations. Mr. Flood.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Before we listen to those 3 amazing stories, on occasion over the past 10 years, we have honored certain individuals whose service to the community has been especially noteworthy and impactful. Tonight, we add 2 individuals to that esteemed list. From the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. G.E. Ghali mobilized and directed the full resources and expertise of LSU Health Shreveport to confront this novel coronavirus. He and a dedicated team created a top-tier testing lab, developed groundbreaking clinical and vaccine trials, delivered strategic testing throughout North Louisiana, implemented the first mass vaccination effort in Louisiana, all while he cared for COVID patients himself. For many, Dr. Ghali was a vital resource for information and guidance during an uncertain time. Dr. Ghali, thank you for your selfless and determined service to our community. And as a token of our appreciation, we have a small gift to give you. So if the public wasn't hearing from Dr. Ghali, it was most likely hearing from Dr. Martha White. As Region 7 Medical Director for the Department of Public Health, Dr. White has coordinated the public health response to this crisis. She continues to be an unflappable medical voice of reason for our community. Even through her own husband's COVID battle and other family tragedies, Dr. White has never wavered or backed down from doing what is best for the citizens of Louisiana. Dr. White, thank you for being our guide during these unprecedented times. Ladies and gentlemen, our 2021 Community COVID Heroes. Our MC is doing double duty tonight.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dr. Ghali, and thank you, Dr. White. We now begin the heart of this evening. I know that these inspirational stories will show you just how important the role our first responders and healthcare providers play each and every day in this community. We begin with Jared Jones' story. Jared was on his way to work when he collided with an 18-wheeler on I-20. After being found clinging to consciousness, Jared was airlifted to Ochsner LSU Health Shreveport, where the trauma team immediately went to work to save his life. This is Jared's story.
I was born and raised in West Monroe, Louisiana. I have two older sisters, both of them live in West Monroe, and I also have a twin brother. We're 10 minutes apart. I've been working for UPS for almost 14 years.
He's a quiet guy. Unless you know him, then he shows more of his personality, he surprisingly has a very funny personality, very helpful, very respectful. He's genuinely a great guy.
I just woke up like a normal day, headed to work.
When he was on the way to work, he noticed that I'd called me. I was asking what I was calling for. And then 2 minutes after that, the first 911 call went through that he had gotten in the wreck. It would be 2 hours after that whenever we found out. His mom called me at 10:58 and asked if I was sitting down and said, we don't know what happened, but Jared's been in a wreck and he's being airlifted to LSU.
Steve was outside doing something in the yard, and he came in and said our daughter Jennifer had called, and Jared had been in a horrible wreck.
On that particular day, they had called out for a two-vehicle MVA that a truck had rear-ended an 18-wheeler. They had advised that Shooter Fire Department, which is another town that's right outside of Ruston, was responding with us. We observed a truck that had hit an 18-wheeler, the backside of it. It was pretty heavy damage to the truck. We saw a bunch of bystanders around and a few other vehicles that had stopped to help because they had seen a major incident go down. Shooter Fire, as I said a while ago, they responded with us. They came on the radio and came on our channel and advised us that there was another incident that happened that almost hit their fire truck.
Couldn't get over here because the traffic was backed up on the interstate. I think it's still from his wreck, and there was another one about the same time his. So it took us forever to get over here.
I didn't believe it whenever I hung up the phone. I called his phone twice because I didn't think it was true. Yeah, but I had to keep telling myself that you have to be calm. You know, you're 6.5 months pregnant. You can't stress the baby out.
cannot describe the feeling of knowing your child is, may not make it.
Jared himself was still inside the truck whenever we arrived on scene. But we approached him, tapped him, and tried to get him to say something. He would never say anything. And so at that point, we did a painful stimuli, which is either sternum rub or we squeeze the shoulder or something like that, trying to get him to respond a little bit. And he picked his head up and turned to us and wasn't really focused on anything, just you could tell that something was going on with him anyway. We did notice that he had a bone protruding from his arm, from above his elbow. Dispatch advised us that the helicopter had accepted the flight and was able to come to the scene. So we went ahead and requested him, mainly because we knew he had altered mental status, and just the mechanism of injury by itself kind of indicated to us that he definitely needed to go to a trauma facility.
Before a patient arrives in the ED, and specifically Mr. Jones, there's a lot of communication between the ambulance, the EMTs, the pre-hospital people that take care of Jared, and they told us that he was in extremis, that his blood pressure was low, that he had a fast heart rate, that he was having a difficult time breathing. So we had an idea that what tier to place him in, and he was a tier 1 trauma, which means that he had potentially life-changing and life-threatening injuries. So once he got here, he was directly transported to the surgical intensive care unit where Dr. Sammer saw him along with the trauma team. Fluids were initiated, blood was drawn, specific tests were done, which included an ultrasound, an electrocardiogram, a chest x-ray, and a CT scan.
When we got to LSU, we found out he was in heart surgery. And we didn't realize it was that bad.
He had several injuries, mostly to his chest and his extremities. One of the scans that showed some potential fluid around his heart was substantiated by a CT scan, which showed a fair amount of fluid around his heart.
Cardiac tamponade is when there is blood or fluid around the heart that prevents the heart from being able to pump and function appropriately.
The fluid around his heart was an emergent problem. We were going to have to take him back to the operating room. We prepared his chest and basically performed a median sternotomy, where an incision is made through the breastbone to examine the injured structure. And indeed, there was a huge amount of clotted blood around his heart, and his heart was not functioning appropriately. And after evacuating the clot, we found a tear near his inferior vena cava where it attached to his right atrium. His heart was detached from the vessels that fed it. We basically took a Prolene suture, which looks like fishing line, on a needle, and ran a suture line along the tear where the inferior vena cava attached to the right atrium. And we carefully did that in a 2-layer fashion. We tested it. We allowed the blood pressure to come up to make sure that there weren't going to be any leaks. And then he did have some coagulopathy, which means he was bleeding from the raw surfaces, which we corrected with some blood products, which is available because we're a level 1 trauma center. He also had several other injuries, including crushing injuries to both sides of his chest with rib fractures and some what we call contusions of the lungs. He had a fracture of his right femur, in addition to potentially bleeding in his intra-abdominal cavity.
He'd been wanting to have a child for the longest time. Like, this was what he wanted. He wanted to have a child, and I just couldn't imagine the fact that I'm finally giving him this child that he wanted, and he might not be here to be able to experience that. And I knew that would be a shame for her not to get to meet him. That would have been horrible.
When Dr. White got out of surgery, we had him come out and talk with us.
They hear about a quarter of what you say because they're so concerned about the outcome.
I don't remember one word he said about it.
He just said that he was a very lucky man. That if it had been 15 minutes later getting over here, he wouldn't have made it.
Our level 1 trauma team really came into light at this time because without the appropriate transport, without the appropriate resuscitation, and definitely without the appropriate recognition of the injury, this would have been a fatality. And if you look at these blunt cardiac injuries, about 80% never make it to the emergency department. Of the 20% that do make it to the emergency department, most of the time they're not recognized. So I think our level 1 trauma team really paid off for this young man had he been transported to an area that didn't have the entire team on board early on, and I think it would have been a bad outcome for Mr. Jones.
First thing I remember was waking up in the hospital with my family standing around me. I had asked them what happened, and they had just told me I've been in a bad accident and that I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Told me better not ever scare me like that again.
They were driving back and forth every day to come see me, and the homies that loved me, even whenever I was asleep, they'd come over there and see me, and I wouldn't even know it.
That was an incredible day. Like, I knew that. Like, I just knew everything was going to be better after that. I could see it, and I could see life in his eyes. It was, I mean, just no matter what the troubles were we were going to have to face after that, or how hard it was to, you know, get him back to being full Jared, it didn't matter because I knew he was going to make it. It was an incredible feeling.
It was a very happy day for us to listen to him talk.
They cried together, they prayed together, you know, they did the things that families do together, and were obviously very concerned about his outcome. But when they saw the little bit of improvement that we experienced every day, they knew that the outcome in great probability was going to be good.
They were telling me that I wouldn't be able to walk for about 3 months, and told me I had restrictions because of my heart surgery.
Once he woke up, he was determined.
First started physical therapy on my elbow, and I did it for about a month before I could do it on my leg. And then I was going 3 days a week. Then once I got to do it on my leg, I would go up there and do my arm, physical therapy on my arm for about an hour, and then I spent another hour doing it on my leg. I did that for about 2 months, I believe.
Once he was able to put weight on that leg, he was up and going.
The 2 days before she was born, they had admitted me to the hospital, and he was there every second. I mean, you could tell he was just beyond happy to be able to be there to witness everything. And I mean, he just lit up. I've never seen that look on somebody's face before, but he was so happy. It was incredible. In any situation, seeing a father and the love he has for his daughter is going to be great, but knowing everything that he had gone through to be able to get to this moment just made it 10 times better.
What a great story for him to be able to get through this and have this present at the end of his hospitalization.
I could give Dr. White anything I got. They saved my son's life, you know.
If you have anyone that has any type of problem, you need to come to LSU.
We are the best chance of a patient's survival because we are able to address and care for any type of need that may come our way.
Thank you for saving my baby's father. Thank you for letting me be able to see that and be able to grow up with her. And it means more to me than I can ever put into words.
My life was definitely saved over here, 100%.
What an amazing story of beating the odds. We are happy to report to you this evening that Jared is doing well. Now for our second story. 5-year-old Braylee Davis was playing on her swing set when she suffered an unthinkable accident. After the Shreveport Fire Department revived her, she was rushed to Ochsner LSU Health and met by the pediatric surgery team. Thanks to their skill and expertise, Braylee is here with us today. This is Braylee's story.
Jason and I got married in July of 2014, and we just jumped right into having kids. We have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and that's where we are. We're so wrapped up in our kids' lives that we didn't even have a dating life.
We kind of had a little family day. They were on spring break. We got home, Karsten threw up in the car seat, so we had to clean the car seat out, and less than 5 minutes later, I hear a scream from my wife, Courtney, and she said, "Braylee."
I started to run over there as I see her fall off the slide, and my body went in shock from there. I laid her down. I started screaming because I screamed for Jason.
By that time, Courtney had taken her off the slide, and she was on her butt in an angle, rope around her neck, body on ground, tongue out, dry. mean, it was just dry. I touched her tongue and lifted her head up, checked her neck, and there was no blood, so I unwrapped the rope immediately, took her and laid her down flat on the ground. Her hands were just, everything was limp. I mean, she just flopped like a baby doll.
I remember flipping the blinds open, and I could see Jason across the street giving chest compressions.
I get 911 on the phone, forget my address, still pumping with one hand, doing CPR on Brayley, and she started gaining a little color. And next thing you know, my neighbor, Cody, he comes jumping, clears our 4-foot chain link fence across our house.
You don't have time to open up a gate. You know, it's hop over that fence and get over there as soon as you can. Jason looked up at me. He said, Cody, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I'd literally taken my CPR class probably a week to 2 weeks before that. Her whole face had this like little blue tint all the way around it. I remember looking down thinking, wow, I'm gonna be giving CPR to a corpse until the paramedics arrive.
I jumped off the truck before we stopped, and I've never done that. It was just one of those instincts that you just know this is bad.
She had no heartbeat until the EMTs worked on her.
Cody had her, he was doing CPR on her probably 3 foot from the slide, which is where she had choked. And then to the left, maybe 8 foot or so over, Courtney was sitting there, you know, almost in the fetal position, just screaming.
There was one guy standing at Brayley's head, and there was another guy who had just walked over right by me. And as soon as he walked over by me, I backed up.
She kind of had her tongue sticking out, and her eyes were partially closed, not completely closed, and her face was just white as a sheet of paper. And no breathing, no movement at all. So it was, you know, for lack of terms, I mean, she was dead.
It was just scary.
I remember praying, saying, you know, Lord, don't take her. Don't take her.
I see Courtney sitting on the ground, just bawling. You know, I remember her saying, my baby's dead. My baby's dead. I know God doesn't make deals, but if I could, I would take her place.
In a rotation of CPR, you know, you do about 3 rotations-ish per minute. And I was about 5 or 6 in, and that's when I noticed her start to gasp.
Okay, we have a pulse. There's a chance.
We were out, my wife and I got the phone call that this young girl had hung herself, was kind of what they just told me over the phone, and now she was having a very hard time oxygenating.
When I came into the unit, they told me that she was down there. They wanted to ECMO her, so I needed to go down there so they could cannulate her. So that's where it all started.
When I got to the hospital and the emergency room, they had done a marvelous job of getting her where she was, because she had had a cardiac arrest, got her back, but we could not oxygenate her. And she was teetering on cardiac arrest almost every moment. So we took her to the interventional suite and put in the large cannula. The cannula size, we measure it with ultrasound to try to decide what size cannula would be best. We could not get that one in her, the best size, so we had to downsize it, which is not optimal, but at that point she had another cardiac arrest, was very low oxygen levels, so we got her on as quick as we could, and then we just kind of dealt with the lack of, we did just not have enough flow like we wanted.
Brayley's my best friend. I love all of my kids, but just something about a mom and a daughter, they had to save her.
We put another cannula into her groin to try to drain it. Well, you have to disconnect the machine for a second and plug it back in. She had another cardiac arrest doing that. We got it on. We had better drainage, but because of her injury and all the inflammation that she had gotten or acquired, her gut started to leak fluid. It's called negative pressure pulmonary edema, and it's when the windpipe gets shut down, like it did with her basically being hung. She takes such deep breaths that it actually breaks the lungs and fractures them, and so they leak fluid, and they leak fluid into the lung. And it's not an uncommon phenomenon. We see it occasionally in people post-operatively. Hers was just the worst of the worst, and
we've never really seen anything like it. And the belly got bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it was compressing the vein that we were trying to draw blood from.
We walked back there and I couldn't do much. I looked for a few seconds and I just couldn't stand seeing her like that, because I just remember the joyful Braley playing in the yard compared to looking at almost a dead body on a table. Without machine, she's nothing.
It was decided to just open up her abdomen at the bedside and try to get that fluid off.
And so I just remember telling her that it's between her and God, and if it's time for her to go, it's time, and I'm gonna love you anyways. I'm not ever gonna forget you. And that surgery felt like it took a lifetime.
She kind of settled out, but then went to renal failure. We still had this open abdomen we had to deal with. It seemed like one crisis to the next crisis to the next crisis. And each time Braley would have a cardiac arrest, it seemed like. We would take this cannula out, hook it back together as quick as we could. She would have another cardiac arrest. And in total, I counted 7.
One of our friends, Tiffany, said, well, let's pray. And so it's about 50 people, not exaggerating, joined in a big prayer circle in that tight hallway on the 5th floor. And then somehow I had the courage to pray. And then Tiffany closed the prayer, and as she said amen, Dr. Scott walked through the door and said the surgery was successful.
We could see a difference being gone for a few days and coming back and looking at her x-ray, looking at her. We could see that, okay, things are going to start to improve a little bit.
We got to hear her talk. It wasn't very good, but it was still hearing her voice, and that was all we needed to keep on fighting.
I told myself I wasn't going to get emotional in this. And I'm normally not an emotional person, but when you think about that, how far she's come, and what she has overcome, without our hospital, without our level 1 trauma center, she probably would not be here today.
Girl, you just don't know. You know, you'll always have a place in my heart.
It's a beautiful moment.
The nurses went above and beyond for her, spooling her, loving on her. Braley and one of the nurses would take selfies at night.
I mean, I don't think I could have ever done things they did. Bathing the baby would be one thing, but to go to the extent of braiding her hair, painting fingernails, toenails, and, you walk out of there feeling it's more motivating.
In spite of all of the ups and downs we had with her case, the one thing that always stayed steady was the team. They never wavered. They never lost confidence. This is what we do. This is why we do it. This is why we work where we work, because we try to save people others won't.
So, can you tell me your name?
Brandy.
And what's your last name?
Davis.
Can you spell it?
My first name?
Yeah.
Brayllee.
Dr. Lewis, I do believe you're right. We should sell Kleenex next year, especially for the MC. What an inspirational story of hope. I do believe that every parent in this room tonight will go home and hug their children just a little tighter. Will Jared and Braley's healers please stand and gather outside in the hall? And now for our final story of the evening. In March of 2020, as COVID-19 cases were rising across our city, our state, our nation, and the world, local physician Dr. Bill White began feeling sick. When he started having difficulty breathing, his wife rushed him to the hospital. After being transferred to LSU Health Shreveport, every possible effort was made to save Dr. White's life. This is Bill's story.
All I remember is them rolling me in and him shaking me in the ICU for consent to intubate. And I remember nothing else.
He was really sick,
It was really scary. And I remember thinking, they're gonna have to drag me out of here. How do you leave?
We knew that he was going to die within hours if we didn't throw everything at him.
Well, I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Went into the military and served as an Army Ranger. And when I was serving as an Army Ranger, that's when I met my wife. She was 18 and I was 20.
I had a F-16 pilot following me around this military party, and Bill kind of came and rescued me from this kind of creepy older guy that was following me around.
We celebrated our anniversary this month, so it was our 29th year anniversary. But we dated 9 years prior, so we've been together a total of 38 years.
And I went to med school, and then he decided to go to med school.
After I finished medical school, she did her pediatric residency here at LSU, and I did an internship year, and then we moved to Philadelphia. Being two physicians, it was quite difficult having really no close family. You know, things worked out, and we moved down to Shreveport, and that was in June of 2001, and we've been here ever since.
In February was when we first started seeing cases in Louisiana. I had been dealing with all of those first cases in our area, seeing every death come across my desk. They all had to be reviewed, and so I knew how bad COVID was. He always had I don't know if he had some sort of belief that he was at risk for COVID, but he, from the very minute we started hearing more about COVID and people started seeing COVID in Louisiana, he locked down his office before anyone else.
I instituted things there just to protect my staff and patients. We were cleaning every doorknob, okay? Mandatory mask wearing, eye protection, everything. We're doing it well before it was. We're talking this February, March, we're doing this. I woke up and I told my wife I wasn't feeling quite well. Something, and I couldn't, as a physician, I'm running through my head what's going on.
I kept asking him, I said, people are getting really short of breath and dying really quickly, so you have to tell me if you get short of breath.
She came to check on me, and I was gray.
By the time we got him to the ER, his pulse ox was in the 70s. And I told him as he was getting out of the car, they're going to intubate you, and that's okay. They're going to take good care of you. You let them do that. And he said, okay.
All I remember is them roll me in and him shaking me in the ICU for consent to intubate. And I remember nothing else.
It was very scary because I knew how sick he was, but you have no idea what to do.
The thing with when COVID-19 struck, most people felt it was just a variant of the common cold. It's no worse than the flu. And we rapidly learned that that wasn't true.
You have to remember, this is very, very early into this. So we really had no idea how to treat people with this disease.
So that was kind of going through my mind. Certainly was probably gonna have to take care of this person tomorrow. And, you know, how do you not get it? How do you not catch it yourself? The first things first, they always said, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, there is no such thing as emergency. So it was, you know, taking the time to make sure we had all of our protective equipment on and that sort of thing before we went into the room, understanding that, you know, yes, that lost time could cost the patient their life, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure and keep all of us protected because we had, you know, a lot of other patients to take care of. Once I put all the stuff on, I just had to trust that it was going to be enough.
was just shocked because not an hour before I was told he's doing better, and now I'm told he's dying.
Bill was definitely in the first wave of critically ill COVID-19 patients. We had multiple patients at that point in time when Bill had presented. So we had some experience.
We knew that he was going to die within hours if we didn't throw everything at him. Fortunately, because we are an academic medical center, we had all of that here. We were already experimenting with it. We were already doing this trial or another trial. We had all the equipment, all the expertise, everything, and we could get it to him within hours. His carbon dioxide was 127. Normal is 35, 40. And that's lethal to most people. We also knew his inflammatory response was so exaggerated that there's no way he's going to live till morning.
His main problem was his lungs. They just weren't working very well. He was very hypoxic. He was on high FO2 on the vent. He was on high vent pressures as well. For several weeks, it was just a matter of continuing to support him, continuing to support his lungs, and ultimately just giving time for things to heal. He was kind of to the point where we were doing everything we could do with a ventilator, and he was approaching the point where if we continued to increase settings, we were going to end up doing more harm than good.
Well, our choice at that point was do we do ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or do we do ECOR, which is mostly for CO2 removal? And since Bill's main problem was his excess CO2 production and inability for him to ventilate and the ventilator to help clear that CO2, we felt that doing ECOR first would be the better process.
He was also one of the first, if not the first patient in the Shreveport-Bossier area to get convalescent plasma, which is plasma, fresh frozen plasma that has specifically come from a donor who has already had and recovered from COVID, with the theory that they've got antibodies to the virus in their plasma that could potentially help somebody that's currently got COVID help try and fight off the virus itself.
Not only did we put him on the machine that removes carbon dioxide extracorporeally, which means we just draw his blood out of his system and remove the CO2 and don't beat him up with the ventilator, but we also did plasma exchange. He got convalescent plasma. He got all of it, only because at the time we didn't know what else to do. You could see within 24 hours, he wasn't over, by any means out of the woods, but you could see he stabilized.
He was really sick. It was really scary. And I remember thinking, they're gonna have to drag me out of here. How do you leave?
His trajectory was such a roller coaster. I've actually never seen anything like it. He would respond one day, and the next day, I thought I was going to have that phone call with Martha. And the next day, he would look better. The next day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, say some really bad news. The next day, he would look a little better. Then suddenly the betters, started to improve, but you're talking over a month.
He's had this endotracheal tube in for a couple of months plus. And prior to COVID, at 2 weeks, we would make sure that if somebody wasn't coming off the ventilator, then we would go ahead and do a trach. So here we were, 4 times that amount of time. At this point, he needs rehab. I mean, he's been laying in a bed for 2 months.
Golly was in my med school class. I've known him forever. He said he needs a trach. And I said, I know, but he's still COVID positive. He's like, I'm gonna trach him tomorrow. And I said, but he's still COVID positive. He's like, I'm gonna trach him tomorrow.
Dr. Golly came up with 2 other faculty members in oral surgery to do the trach. The 3 of them did, and of course it went flawlessly and no issues with it whatsoever. And Bill actually kind of started waking up and becoming a lot more interactive.
So I was in ICU in the whole front of the wall is glass so the nurse can see it, obviously. But I could see my reflection, and I had a full beard, but I couldn't move. My legs were completely flaccid. Couldn't move my arms. I could move my right arm, and I was trying to get up to touch my face, and my nails were long. The nurse jumped up and almost fell to the floor. I could see tears running down her eyes.
You know, you're just overwhelmed. It's overwhelming. You're just joyful and happy for my children.
And then my wife came in. She was hopeful and scared of would I recognize her, what was going to be my cognitive ability. And she was very calm, and I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to be strong. And she asked me, do you want to know how long you've been here? And because I looked around the room, and there was no date. And then she told me, and then I'll be honest with you, it didn't really sink in. It took a couple days.
He was not going to sit in that bed. He was going to rehab. Now, you know, he trained in physiatry, physical medicine rehab, and he knows how weak he was. And as soon as he came off that ventilator, he was trying to do physical therapy.
And I got dressed every morning, waiting for to do something, even though I couldn't move. They made arrangements to bring a physical therapist in, an occupational therapist who felt comfortable being in that thing, and they worked with me tremendously. They work with me every day, and I think they're a little worried that I was going to push too hard. If you don't fight the good fight, you lose it. And that's as simple as that. And I tell every patient that, and now I am having to live that. So I was released from the hospital May 17th.
It was amazing. I really never thought I'd see it. I saw him get better and better and better, and then to come back and see him getting in a wheelchair, going out to his car. You know, hard to make an old man like me cry, but it was pretty tearful.
I knew without a doubt that we wanted Suzanne Tinsley and Maria to do his rehab.
So when he came in, he was in a wheelchair, and so we started talking about what he'd been doing since he'd been released. And so he said, well, at home, I walk a little bit, but I use a walker because I feel very unsteady on my feet. But mostly if it's going to be anything longer than 30 or 40 feet, I'm going to be in my wheelchair.
What was really interesting when he came in for that first time and we said, okay, what are your complaints? He started listing, you know, well, I have proximal weakness. I can't pick up my left foot. I've got some peroneal problems. My left shoulder, I don't know if I have a scapular nerve issue or if it's just weakness. So that was kind of unique to interact with him in that way, because basically he did his own differential diagnosis. We got him in our vector system, which is a system that can de-weight him, and so that his joints and his muscles and his body isn't accepting all of his weight, and that we could practice on walking and doing squats and trying to develop some functional strengthening, but also protect him at the same time. You could tell he was so driven. He wanted to get back. Just his attitude was, I've been spared in this life and I want to get back and make a difference. And so what was difficult was trying to rein him in a little bit, again saying, okay, Dr. White, we'll get you there, I promise, but let's not try to do it in a day.
The last day that he came, he was running around the track, not walking. And then when he came to us the day before discharge, he told us he had run for 2 hours on his treadmill at home. And the fact that he could do that was remarkable. It just showed that he was basically almost back, because he was doing 3 hours before, but he was back where he needed to be.
Now I had a goal. It was unrealistic, you know, that I wanted to be back seeing patients in some form by June 1st. Well, it took me till about June 21st. And I was able to work half days, and by August, I was back doing some of the basic procedures that I do. But it took probably until November to where I felt I had enough stamina to work a normal day.
He survived because of the care he was able to get at LSU.
One of the best things that Dr. White brought to our unit was this sense that, okay, we're kind of on the right track for a few things. We got to weed through what worked, what didn't work. But we knew that what we were doing was right on. We were able to share a lot of knowledge We have grown from that. A lot of patients have gone on extracorporeal support, which is pulling blood out and oxygenating and putting it back in. And now what was experimental has now become mainstream.
I don't think people realize how amazing that building is, the people who staff in there is, all the equipment that they have, everything that they bring to the table is just top notch. When he needed that extra high level of care, I was just so grateful that LSU was there to give it to him.
If I had a professor in med school, he always said that you'll never understand a disease as well as a patient who suffers it as a physician. And he couldn't be more right, but it's given me a more realistic expectation and perspective of what do they go through on a daily basis when they suffer things. If I didn't give it my 100% effort, I feel that I was failing those who saved me. I owed them to do my best because they did their best.
Yeah, they saved his life, and we're just forever indebted to them. I loved him before this happened, and it's just grown beyond measure.
Dr. White represents thousands of COVID-19 patients cared for across our state. We celebrate the many who have recovered, and we remember those we have lost. Would Dr. White's healers please stand and gather outside the hall for the recognition ceremony? At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Chris Kevel, LSU Health Shreveport's Vice Chancellor for Research, to come to the podium.
Thank you, Wynette, and good evening, everyone. Wow, that's such a story, and this is such 18 months we in this community have had to deal with the pandemic. Really, I think the key thing here is that these are inspirational stories. I have a feeling the script was taken away. Aha, here we are. Here is mine. There you go. There says, thank you, Wynette. Okay, that was 6 pages in. So I needed to provide a little comedic relief so far. So what incredible stories we've seen tonight. In particular, as I think many of you will know, Dr. White's story was particularly moving for me because it reminds me of the early days of this pandemic, when there were really completely unknown and uncertainties that we had to deal with. Despite these challenges, LSU Health Shreveport revealed the importance of an academic medical center and rose to the occasion. In March 2020, Dr. Andrew Rochko and Dr. Martin Sapp reached out to let us know that LSU Health's viral faculty and their expertise were ready to help in response to the pandemic. These early efforts ultimately led to the now established Center of Excellence for Emerging Viral Threats that you heard earlier about, that Dr. Lewis explained. In fact, the initial EVT lab was up and running in just 12 days. From processing hundreds of thousands of COVID tests to deploying nursing home testing strike teams, from leading Louisiana in conducting greater than 50% of the viral genomic sequencing, to leading mass vaccination efforts, the men and women of the CEVT put their lives on hold and many times at risk to fight this pandemic. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank them for their heroic efforts over this past year and a half. Tonight, we'd like to honor them alongside our other healers. Would the COVID response honorees please stand and gather outside the hall for the recognition ceremony? Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Lewis to join me on the stage for the recognition ceremony. While the healers are gathering backstage, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize CRM Studios, specifically Greg Lawrence, Kevin Alexander, and Danny Foots for producing these outstanding videos. Thank you so much for using your talents to retell these stories. Now we've come to that point in every fundraiser where you know it's coming and you're thinking, well, maybe it's not coming, but it is. You know, no matter how successful a fundraiser is, you can never really raise enough money to do all the things that you need to do. This year, we have been especially fortunate to have been the beneficiary of your amazing generosity. And Kevin tells me that as of right now, we have raised about $684,000. Now, we would love to take that to the next level. Our goal tonight is, with your contributions this evening, to make that number $700,000. I'm pretty sure that we can do it. There are two ways that you can donate. You can either scan the back of the QR code that is on your program. If you're not comfortable with scanning a QR code like me, you need to fill out the envelope that is on your table. That's the good old-fashioned way of doing this. And we have some receptacles at the exit doors as you leave the hall this evening, and you can be certain that your donations are safe and they're going to be tallied very carefully. I understand that we also have a little bit of a surprise announcement to make, so I'd like to call Kevin back to the stage. Kevin? Kevin? Well, I don't know where Kevin is. Okay, how about Armin Roos? Armin is a man of many surprises, and he had a surprise for us this evening when he came in. So I'm going to let Armin tell you about the wonderful thing, the incentive that he's offering this evening. So there's Kevin. Just help me. You're talking, so Armin.
Prepare yourselves. Armin Roos.
Thank y'all. You can't see anything up here with the lights on. First of all, I want to thank Wynette. You've done a fabulous job. I feel like we're watching Jeopardy, where you hired yourself to be the MC, but we're not going to take the next step and fire you. Number two, there's a group I want to recognize real quickly to get overlooked. We have the greatest staff in the world. Kevin has put a team together that runs this office that makes those of us who are on the board, makes us look good and our job very easy. And so Kevin and any of his staff that's here, that sitting, or most of them are working, thank you very much for what you do every day. Oh, they're all back here lining everything up. They're fabulous. We were given 2 parking passes to the LSU McNeese game. Oh, one other thing. That new building, that building's looking for a name. So if somebody wants to make a really big gift, please talk to Kevin, because we'd love to put your name up there. The Dr. Lewis building, or whatever it needs to be. But we were given two parking passes for the LSU McNeese game. One of these is spectacular. It is lot 101, which is the one immediate west of the stadium. If you come out the Sample Gate or the Campbell Gate, this is right there. And then the other one's lot 400, which is the second lot south of the campus. And so Kevin's got these, and if somebody would like to make a really nice contribution, we're going to give you these tickets. The contribution's not to Kevin, it's to the foundation. And thank y'all for your help.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our honorees, starting with those involved in Jared's case. From LSU Health Shreveport, emergency and family medicine resident Dr. Heath Birchfield. Assistant Professor of Anesthesiology, Dr. Debbie Chandler. Assistant Clinical Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Dr. Brad Chauvin. Trauma Medical Director, Dr. Navdeep Samra. Professor of Radiology, Dr. Guillermo Sangster. Clinical Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine, Dr. Brittany Sternard. Anesthesiology Resident, Dr. Punyuz Thakur. Professor and Chair, Department of Surgery, Dr. R. Keith White. From Ochsner LSU Health Shreveport, Surgical ICU Nurse, Lacey Kempf. Nurse Anesthetist, B.J. Netterville. Surgical ICU Nurse, Erica Tilbury. From Pafford Air One, Flight Nurse, Julie Wallace. Paramedic Joshua Yuntz. And from the Ruston Fire Department, Paramedic Captain Chris Butler. And Kevin, if you could provide us with the healers for Braley's case. Perfect. And now for Braley's healers. From LSU Health Shreveport, Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine, Dr. Stephen Baker. Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, Dr. Marco Quispe-Leveau. Clinical Associate Professor of Anesthesiology, Dr. Shilpa Devi Patel. Associate Professor of Anesthesiology, Dr. Shizoba Mazari. Professor of Pediatrics, Surgery, and Medicine, Dr. Keith Scott. Clinical Assistant Professor of Surgery, Dr. Donald Sorrell. From Ochsner LSU Health Shreveport, Pediatric ICU Nurse, Anna Broussard. Respiratory Therapist, Chris Cates. Pediatric ICU Nurse, Susan Forcade. Respiratory Therapist, Seth Harrison. Pediatric ICU Nurse, Jerry Carey. Pediatric ICU Nurse, Christy Lofton. Pediatric ICU Nurse, Christy Rawlings. Pediatric Nurse, Hannah Smith. Pediatric ICU Nurse, Heather Taylor. From the Shreveport Fire Department, firefighter EMT Brent Martwick. Engineer EMT Jake Shaver. Braley's neighbor, Cody Anderson. Braley's brother, Tanyan Davis. I'm sorry, I skipped a very important pediatric ICU nurse, Caitlin Exline. Braley's pediatrician, Nikki Humphreys, MD. And now for Dr. White's healers. From LSU Health Shreveport, cardiology fellow, Dr. Haraj Awib. Associate Professor of Cardiology, Dr. Pari Dominic. Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine and Assistant Director of the Extracorporeal Life Support Program, Dr. Jonathan Eaton. Professor of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery, Dr. G.E. Ghali. Professor of Clinical Medicine, Pulmonary and Critical Care, Dr. Robert Holliday. Clinical Associate Professor of Physical Therapy, Dr. Marie Vasquez Morgan. Okay, now here he is one more time. What doesn't this man do? Dr. Keith Scott. Associate Professor of Physical Therapy and Associate Director for the Center for Brain Health, Dr. Suzanne Tinsley. Professor and Division Chief of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine, Dr. Bob Walter. From Ochsner LSU Health Shreveport, ICU Nurse Karen Byerly. Cardiology Nurse Renee Causey. ICU Nurse Mary Joy Ann Harmon. Physical Therapist Aaron Huey. Respiratory Therapist Brandy Morrison. ICU Nurse and ECMO Coordinator Heather Klein. Respiratory Therapist Christy Ruppel. Occupational Therapist Amanda Rushing. Operations Coordinator MICU Lisa Phillips. ICU Nurse Supervisor and Operations Coordinator Trina Turnstell. And Dr. White's personal hero, his convalescent plasma donor, Mr. David Langston. And now for our COVID honorees. Professor of Medicine and Pediatrics and Institutional Official Designee, Office of Clinical Trials, Dr. Ricky Bass. Community COVID-19 Strike Teams Outreach Program Coordinator, Jennifer Burns. Emerging Viral Threat Lab Director, Dr. Jennifer Carroll. Community COVID-19 Strike Teams Project Coordinator, Anissa Gunn. Associate Professor of Microbiology and Immunology and Director of COVID Genomic Sequencing, Dr. Jeremy Camille. Emergency Medicine and Critical Care Clinical Research Coordinator, Nurse Kim Hutchison. Community COVID-19 Strike Teams Logistic Coordinator, Quentin Knuckles. Community COVID-19 Strike Teams Vaccine Coordinator, Nurse Michelle Rayleigh. Professor of Pediatrics, Medicine, and Surgery, Dr. Keith Scott. Associate Professor of Microbiology and Immunology, Viral Oncology, Dr. Rona Scott. Professor of Pediatrics and CEVT Director of Community Outreach for Testing and Vaccination, Dr. John Van Sherry. Associate Professor of Microbiology and Immunology, Dr. Matt Woolard. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your 2021 heroes and healers. What an amazing group. I would now like to invite this evening's featured patients to the stage to say a few words. Jared Jones was unable to be with us this evening, but I know that he sends a sincere thanks to his healers. Dr. White, would you like to go first?
It's a great evening. I'm just glad to be able to be here and thank all those who cared for me. I'm glad Karen's here, my nurse in the ICU. She had to put up with quite a bit because when I was awake, she had to deal with all my demands of wanting to get dressed, wanting to wear my shoes, even though I couldn't walk. Allowing to turn her head while I monkeyed my way off the bed to try to do squats against the bed and all those things. I'd like to thank Dr. Van Sherry for keeping my wife calm and at bay when the darkest days looked like they were going to stay dark before they turned bright. And I'd like to thank the medical community for all the support and well wishes and prayers. I'd like to thank my beautiful wife for holding the course and my kids, and above all, I'd like to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for without him, nothing would be possible. Lastly, go Tigers.
And now, Braley, would you and your mom like to say a few words?
Are you ready? Okay. Anything you want to say? We just want to say thank you to my husband, to my son, to Cody, to every pediatric ICU nurse, pediatric nurse that was on the 5th floor, Dr. Scott, Brent, Jake. This night means the world to us, and I'm just so thankful that y'all were there and God had y'all in the moment, in the right time to save her. And it means the world to me, and I know it means the world to her dad too. Thank you.
Jared, Braley, Dr. White, and your families, thank you for allowing us to share your very personal journeys and to join you in honoring your amazing healers. Healers, on behalf of everyone in this room and those who benefit daily from your expertise, care, and compassion, we sincerely appreciate all that you do. If you would please remain on the stage for a group photo. And to all of you, our honored guests, thank you for trusting us enough to come out tonight and support this amazing institution. Please have safe travels as you make your way home this evening. And table sponsors, please take the beautiful centerpiece on your table. Those were put together for us by Kyle Lloyd at Colony House. Thank you and good night.